The anatomy of blood. Blood is composed of four major components: plasma, leukocytes, thrombocytes, and erythrocytes. Plasma is the liquidy stuff. Leukocytes is a fancy word for white blood cells. Leuko, when you see it, always refers to the color white. Cyte always refers to cells. Thrombocytes are platelets. And erythrocytes are red blood cells. From time to time, I'll use these terms interchangeably, like erythrocytes or red blood cells. They do mean the same thing, but for the purposes of a test, I expect that you're able to use all of these words correctly. Plasma, as I mentioned, is the liquid portion of the blood. It makes up about 55% of your total blood volume. When you see a blood smear, like you can see here in the background, all this empty white space is filled with the liquidy portion of blood. It's mostly water, but it's also got other stuff like some sugars and proteins and other specks and cells floating around in it too. Leukocytes, also known as white blood cells, are your immune system cells. They fight off different kinds of infection. You've got a few different kinds of leukocytes, and each one has a semi-specialized role, but really their roles all overlap. So for any given infection, a couple different kinds of cells are probably coming onto the scene at least. When you look at a blood smear like this, the big purple guys that you see here in the background too are all different kinds of white blood cells. They're large, they're mobile, and you find lots more of them in the blood when somebody has an infection. Thrombocytes aren't actually cells at all, even though it has the word cyte or the suffix cyte in it. They're fragments of a cell, and their role in the blood is clotting. So you can see them in blood smears in these little, this is a clump of them over here, a couple of clumps. These little dots that you see floating around, those are all, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them right there. Those are all individual platelets. When you have a wound, the edges of the wound will secrete a chemical that attracts them to the site of the wound. They'll come, they'll stick to the edges and help shore up the blood loss a little bit. When they attach, they'll release even more of that chemical, and more will come to the scene. Erythrocytes are red blood cells. You can see them here because they're stained red with dye, and they have this characteristic kind of donut-y shape. You see how the middle looks sort of translucent? They're not actually hollow in the middle. If you look at them from the side, they're just sort of pinched in a little bit. All cells have nuclei. You can see the nucleus of the white blood cell here. One of the special things about erythrocytes is that it doesn't actually have a nucleus anymore. It sheds that in the process of maturation. It used to have one, but it doesn't anymore. Since it doesn't have a nucleus, it doesn't contain any of its own DNA either. Instead, it sheds that nucleus so that it can hold more of a little protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that carries oxygen to deposit into your cells and picks up carbon dioxide waste from your cells to get rid of it in the lungs. Hemoglobin is a really important iron storage molecule, and it's an important molecule to know for forensic purposes.